What's up, everybody? It's Realistic with Realistic Productions doing another tutorial for SoundOracle.net. And today we're going to go over some different things to consider for layering drums. Now, this is probably already a technique that you're using for your music, whether you're beat making, composing, producing, and you're probably already applying this. This is such an important thing to do as a beat maker and producer, though, is layering your stuff. You want to be able to create new sounds. You want to be able to create thicker sounds, maybe nastier sounds. It's so clutch when it comes to just creating your own unique sound. And so I'm not really going to go over so much of what to do for layering, but some things to consider when you're layering, some different techniques to consider, some different things to consider when choosing your layers, and also some frequencies that you might want to duck out of the two and what you can do to blend them all together at the end. All right, let's dive in.
What's up, everybody? So I got Pro Tools open up here, and I'm going to go over some different techniques and tips to use when you're layering different drums and stuff. And as always, you can use these techniques in any DAW. It doesn't matter which one you have. And you can use these with any plugins. It doesn't have to be the exact plugins that I'm using. And if you haven't already and you're capable of it, go ahead and open up your DAW choice. You'll find that you'll learn a lot more if you do this along with me versus trying to save this and retain this for later. All right, so layering drums is a really big thing, especially in hip hop, EDM, trap, pop music. It's something that can really set your drums apart, give it some unique characteristics, some things that can really help pop it through, but there are some things to consider. And so one of the first things that I wanted to mention to consider here, we'll start with kick drums. Maybe when you have two kicks, you want to have one that has a little bit more bottom end to it, that's a little more bassier, and then another one you might want to choose that has a little bit more attack, a little bit more top end. So I'll show you one that has a little bit more top end here, and then one that's a little more bassy with some bottom end. So those might be two that could really work well together. And I always recommend too that whenever you're doing anything with samples, that you should use high quality samples, and you should get them from places that have a good reputation. Personally, I get all my stuff from SoundOracle.net. That's always a good place to go to if you're looking for high quality samples. And that's always a good place to start, because then the work's a lot less to do when you're starting out with really good samples. So I'll show you what these two sound like together. Right. So those two, they do sound good together, but there are a couple things that we could possibly do here. And one of the things that we could do is we could EQ them a little bit differently. And so for this kick right here, we might not need all this bottom end. Right. So we have to choose which one of the kicks should have the dominant low end here. And clearly the choice is that's where the low end should come. So we can get rid of some of this low end, because we really just want that little top end right there. And then same with this, we can get rid of some of this top end here. Just little subtle things to help it pop a little bit. And so another thing that we might want to consider is side chaining with a compressor here for the transients. That way, when the transient of our attack kick hits, the transient of our lower end kick is going to get pushed down a little bit. And there's a few ways that we could do this. We could start with just a regular compressor here. So let's just name this kick sidechain. Yeah, and if you don't know too much about sidechaining, I do have a tutorial on that, so I'm not going to go too in depth on how to sidechain, but if you're interested, go check out my tutorial on the sidechaining. But what we'll do is we'll just sidechain this kick here, and I'll be a little aggressive because I want this to kind of die down a little bit. Right, so without the sidechain, we hear it, right? No difference, right? So the difference that we're going to hear is once this signal from this top kick is sent in, then we'll hear the attack kind of get pushed down a little bit. And so then what these sound like together, it just allows it to punch through a little bit more. And so I got a little loop here that I grabbed from SoundOracle Spacewalk just to throw it in so I can show you what it sounds like when this is in there, because maybe by itself it sounds better, without the kick or whatever, the attack and the kick. But when you start having a beat in there and some instruments, you'll see that there might be a little bit of a difference, because you want to consider that stuff too. Just little things to gel a little bit more. And another thing that you could do is we could do some multi-band compression here. This is one of my favorite things to do, because then we can have a little bit more control. And I actually would recommend using the multi-band compression here. So what we're going to do is we're really just going to focus on this top end right here. So let's put this signal right here, send that there. Right, so we've really got aggressive with kind of using the attack there to kind of get pushed down a little bit. So let's check out what those two sound like together now with the multi-band sidechain. I can just hear it kind of punching through a little bit more. So let's check this out, and if we listen to it with the music in there as well. Just little things to help them punch through a little bit more. Another thing that we could do, we could use transient designers as well. And what we could do is we could ease up on the sustain on our attack kick, because our lower end kick is going to have a little bit more of some bottom end, so we might want to let that sustain a little bit. And then our bottom kick, we might want to take out some of the attack with the transient designer, and that way the top kick can have a little bit more of that punch through. So let's start with the top kick here, and we'll ease up on the sustain. Right, that way the lower one can ring out a little bit more, and then on our lower one we'll ease up on the attack. Right, so let's give those a listen here. And then we'll hear it with the mix, because, sometimes by itself it might not sound better, but then when we hear it and the whole set of things, it's like, okay, yeah, that makes a difference. I am going pretty aggressive there. Might ease up just a little bit, but again, just kind of things to consider that can help a little bit when you're choosing your layers and everything. It definitely kind of helps them gel a little bit more. So another thing, maybe the biggest thing that you could consider is making sure that your kicks are in phase with each other, right? Your layers. This is, I think, something that gets overlooked quite a bit. And I think that a lot of people that are layering drums might not put this in consideration, that your layers might not be in phase with each other. Now, there's quite a bit of ways that you could do this. You could just flip the phase. Any EQ will have the ability to flip the phase. It's always going to look like this little polarity sign, and then you can flip the phase. So I'll show you that. Right, and just that little bit, you can hear it kind of make a difference there. And I'll show you some other ones here too, because you can see it's pretty much on every EQ that you'll be able to just flip the phase. And you can hear a difference right there. And basically, we're checking for is if the wave are exact opposites of each other, they're going to cancel each other out. And if they're perfectly 180 degrees out of each other, you'll hear silence if it's mono, right? And so the issue though is sometimes they're not going to be 180 degrees out of phase. Sometimes they're just going to be a little bit out of phase, so it will still be there, but it will make it sound thinner. And that's also why I use one of these plugins that can detect how much out of phase it is, because it might not always be 180 degrees out of phase. This is a plugin by SoundOracle that I really like, Auto Align. Waves makes a plugin too that allows you to do this. This is just the one that I have, but they kind of work the same. So I can send this information from this to this kick right here, and now I can detect the phase and the delay and the polarity between the two, and then it will detect and see how out of phase it is. And so what I got to do is I got to run the information through there, so I got to play it, and then you'll see that this number will change. And it might not be by 180, it might be 100, it might be 360, it might be 84. You'll notice that it allows the drums to get a little bit thicker when they're in phase with each other. All right, cool. So we flipped the phase now, and I'll show you what that sounds like with it and without it. Yeah, you can hear it thicken up. And so what we'll do is we'll flip this into mono. If you haven't seen me use this before, this is a free plugin by Boz Digital Labs called Manipulator. You can just do a Google search and be able to download it for free. It allows you to flip things into mono just in case you don't have that option on your interface. So I'll show you when they're out of phase with each other and I flip it into mono. So we lose a little bit. Now let me put it back into phase. You see how those thicken up and you get the full effect of your layers. So that's always something to really consider. And I do really highly recommend you getting yourself a plugin that can detect how much out of phase it is and be able to flip it. Because you see, this isn't 180, it's 286. So by flipping it by 180 degrees, we're not fully getting it out of phase. So using a really useful plugin like this, we're able to really get it and get the full benefit out of it and fully get it to just really punch through. So that those are some options. Another thing that you could do is you could layer your kick drums and pan them left and right. And so those are some options. So let me show you those. This is something that I got this tip from SoundOracle himself, and it's pretty cool because what you might want to consider is having a more lower end kick coming down the middle, and then maybe some kicks that have some effects on it. You pan one hard left and then one hard right. Right. And then you could throw some effects on it too if you wanted, some phasers, some vocoders, just a bunch of different options that you could do with that. I'll show you these sound like, and you'll see that they'll sound wider. And again, this is a trick that you might want to consider, making sure that they're in phase with each other. So one of the things that you want to consider though is when you're layering kick drums like this is to start with EQing them separately, right? So, we got to choose which kick that we want to dominate our lower end. So we'll probably choose this one, and then we'll just get some frequencies out of it. And then maybe take the top end out just a little bit of that one. And we'll check out this kick coming down to the left. And we might want to take out most of the low end of this one, right? Because we already got the low end coming down pretty hard through the center there. And we'll take out some frequencies that we don't like. Right, and then we'll do the same down here. All right, so now we got these. All right, now again, they might sound when you're listening to it like, hey man, I actually like it better without the EQ, but that's just soloed. So let's check it out when there's some music in there because there's going to be a lot of other stuff going on. You might see that these are able to punch through a little bit and not crowd up the whole mix. And then too, you can always make little adjustments too if you see that maybe you took a little too much out. Cool. And then another thing to consider is after you do that is you EQ them separately or put effects on them separately, and then you might want to consider doing a mix of them as one whole unit. So now I got all of these sent to this little sum right here. And so I will now EQ it a little bit differently as one whole unit and just kind of get some stuff out, get them to gel a little bit, might boost some stuff too. Right, and then we can kind of boost some things together if we so choose. Maybe as one whole cohesive unit here, we could boost the attack a little bit. And then maybe add just a little bit more bottom end as one whole unit together. Without the cut EQ here. And then without all of it. So that's one thing to consider too. And then just, kind of check out what they sound like with everything coming down the center. So just some things that you can do to widen them up a little bit. And another thing too to consider is your gain staging. Anytime that you're adding layers, you got to consider that these might get a little bit louder too, So like if they were all just coming down the center, we're going to be pretty up there too when we take a look at our master fader there. And so maybe something to consider is bringing these down a little bit, and then also paying attention too. If you got them all at the same level, you'll notice here that the left channel is getting is a little bit louder. So maybe just making some adjustments so they're a little bit more even on each other there. All right, and then so another thing too to consider is layering some stuff with different sound effects, maybe stuff that you wouldn't normally think of. So I got like a snare here and just a few sound effects, but I mean, the possibilities are endless. You could go around with a location recorder and record yourself just hitting random things around town or around the house. You could buy some sound effects online too. There's so many different packs that you could do, but what you could do is, like, for instance, I'll show you this snare. Right, it's already a really awesome sounding snare, but maybe we want to add like some sound effects to it. So this is some sound effects that I bought a while back ago, and this is, I think, like it's a bullet going into the dirt. Right, it doesn't sound exactly like that, but it could be a cool layer. So I'll show you what those sound like together. Right, versus without it. So I'll show you that in the mix. And again, this might not be the right fit for this melody, but just to kind of show you some examples. Right, and then there's other possibilities for layers too. I got some another bullet going off of a heavy metal plate instead of the dirt. So that's an option that you could do, right? And then maybe that's something too, you could use a transient designer on, because the end of the tail of that sound of that metal plate does go a little far. So, the same concepts that we were applying earlier with the kick drums is we could do that with some of these sound effects. It sustains a little bit less. And I'll just show you the last one I got, like the sounded like I think it's like a swish or like karate chop type thing, right? So put that in the snare. So then you have the options now to create all these brand new sounds and just kind of make yourself some own unique drums, because it's so important for producers and beat makers to have their own signature sounds. Right? It's something that people, if you think about Timberland and Dr. Dre and Kanye West, they all kind of have their signature drum sound. So when you hear their beats, you're like, oh, that's a Timberland song, or that's a Dre beat. And so it's really important to consider doing things to layer drums. And yeah, so hopefully this helped out. Hopefully you get some useful techniques out of this, and hopefully you can make some really killer samples and killer layers.
So I'm hoping that you got a lot out of this tutorial today. Hopefully there's some information that was useful. If you're getting a lot out of this but you want to see more, please feel free to comment below. Let us know what kind of tutorials that you want to see in the future, and Oracle and I can definitely make that happen. We're always trying to find the content that you want to see. If you're liking what you're hearing from me, you can find me everywhere on social media at Realistic Productions. You can find me at the web, realisticproductions.net. You can find my man SoundOracle everywhere at SoundOracle. And if you're looking for the best 808s, the best kicks, the best snares with the craziest loops and samples you can find on the internet right now, go to SoundOracle.net. All right, till next time.